All right, welcome to part 2 of this episode, where we're going to get back to the Dragon Reborn, and we're starting in chapter 37 with the ladies.
Well, let's start this one because we talked about some formatting last time. The comments that are coming in are from the last episode, so let's do those first because they address the last one.
Okay.
Instead of going at the end and then talking about what we talked about last time, because it could also make a little bit of a recap too. So I responded to Paul and told him what we were going to do and to watch the next video, and he says, cheers, cool, awesome, nice to see you again, Paul. Scott: the dozen guys and a woman were clearly intending to ambush Rand. The gray man is included in the party, and the woman is a dark friend, and it's the reason he's with them. And what else did he say? Jordan makes it feel like Rand is being insane with the lining of the body's business, which I know you brought up a different point last time, but I'm kind of with Scott here. I do think she was a dark friend, because otherwise a gray man could have just been out of nowhere without Rand being able to notice him. So I think my original read was they were dark friends, and I would say that Scott's probably right, but your take on it is a little bit uncomfortable.
I remember that was my original read too, but then in subsequent rereads, which is the point of what we're doing here, is the reevaluation from rereading it through with a different perspective. I'm not so sure. I think they probably were, but I'm not so sure.
Here's why I think I'm a little bit more sure, because we have so much going forward that Rand feels bad about death in general, that he's responsible for, that you would think that he would have thought of this again as a regret, almost like, oh, was I going insane? Were they bad people? Now that I know what gray men are and all of those kind of things. So I think because we don't get, I don't think also Jordan would have made him a cold-blooded killer at this point.
Well, that's why that was my point, is he's not being a cold-blooded killer. I think he might have confused them because he was sensing the dark friend. He was sensing the gray man.
But I mean, even by accident, because of the way he feels so bad about every death.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I'm with Scott here. And he also left another comment. If you want to take a deep dive, ask yourself why 3 boys from the same village are so strongly Tavern. Goes on, and then he said, consider the fact that the 3 boys went exploring and camping in what was the forbidden haunted hills, the very hills where Manatharin was. So tying together what they did as kids to, which again, one of the themes we talk about is everything leading up to this moment is what makes them the way they are, and that includes their adventures into these places that what Jordan has is places matter, right? In Jordan's mind. So Shadow Logoth wouldn't be a big deal if the place where all that happened didn't matter. And you had almost the opposite vibe with Manatharin. So I think it's a pretty good point there. But all of the events leading up to their current life is what makes them who they are. The fact that they're Tavern means all the other stuff just molds around them in that time.
Yeah. Well, I think more to his point, maybe what he was getting at is that, so 3 very strong Tavern came from the same place at the same time and knew each other and were friends because, and we see this in the opening of in the prologue to The Great Hunt with the little dark friend social hour, that they are 3 legs of a stool. They are important. The 2 non-dragon Tavern were spun out to support the dragon, because his goal is so important and so difficult. He needs the support, and that becomes more and more evident as the series progresses, and Matt and Perrin come more and more into their own unique and special attributes and powers. We're already seeing some of it with Perrin, with the wolf and the wolf dream. So not just the the sight and the smell and those things in the real world, but now we're seeing he has some real things to offer, and he's going to gain some real insight in the wolf dream. That's going to give him a whole nother level of ability and importance.
Well, and then it also gets you exploring the ruins and stuff. It goes back to that age-old question, because they're threads in the pattern and important threads, and all together, did that affect their life more than the fact that they are that part of the pattern where they drawn to go explore together? Because you don't hear about the other friends of theirs that they had in that town doing the same thing, even though was it the Copelands and Congers were troublemakers and everything, but they didn't go out doing that. So
they do mention a number of specific names of boys close to their age, but not as close as these three are, because they're all three, I think Maureen says, all three within months of each other, of their birth dates. So they do mention and they do interact with some other young men and boys that they know and are friends with, but not as tight as those three.
All right, so that addresses the comments. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. I think it feeds the algorithm, but it also gives us things to think about and different angles to look at things. So that's the thing about Jordan books, is everybody overthinks them. Let's all overthink them together.
Yes, but that segues perfectly into the start of this section, because now we have the parallel of the three boys with the three ladies, and they're not as close in the same way, because Nynaeve is a number of years older. She's like her mid-20s, I think. And Elaine and Egwene are like 18, 17, 18. Yeah. So, but they all have different personalities, different backgrounds, different things that they bring to this heroic group, in the same way that the lads do. And that's what makes it interesting and real here, because right off the bat, we have tension at the very beginning of this chapter, that Egwene and Nynaeve keep butting heads, and Elaine is kind of stuck in the middle, in the same way that Perrin is kind of the middle between Matt and Rand. And we saw that especially in The Great Hunt, when Matt was kind of being an a-hole and Rand was being a stubborn dork, and Perrin's the one in the middle trying to keep everyone together. And we see so that's Elaine's personality, and that's her purpose kind of in this group of three. But many rant on why modern storytelling sucks, and why I was momentarily hopeful that the series wouldn't be completely terrible, because very rarely are you allowed to write flawed female protagonists, or flawed any oppressed group protagonists, right? So the opening with Leandrin being the witchy woman that she is, and done so well, and as misogynistic apply to women as well. I don't know if there's another word for that, but the way she is, I thought, we actually have a flawed character here. But they pretty quickly established that she's the bad guy, so I guess it's allowed then. But here we have three very real characters, because they're all three very flawed. And so they have to recognize their flaws, they have to overcome their flaws, they have to work through their flaws to achieve the high aims they're after.
Well, more specifically with Nynaeve, not only is she flawed because of her temper, but that very same flaw keeps her from basically being the most badass woman in the world.
Yes.
So
that she can, and yeah, and we're about to see that here in the next chapter, when they meet the Aiel. But
yeah, because
they
we're
have
on 37, right?
yeah, chapter 37 is just kind of the setup for what's coming next. But you know, the point being right off the bat is they have to figure out how to live and work together, and Nynaeve is being stubborn, but Egwene is kind of being reactionary stubborn, in that if one says up, the other says down, as Elaine puts it. So she's opposing Nynaeve just on general principle, even if what Nynaeve is saying is sense. But Egwene is resenting that Nynaeve still sees herself as the wisdom of their village, and so she's the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And as Egwene says, we're all on the same level now. But I also think there's an underlying, and maybe I'm just reading too much in this because of what happens later, but I do kind of feel like there's an underlying lie to what Egwene is saying, in that I feel like she wants to be the one in charge. So it's not just resenting that Nynaeve is taking charge when we're all on the same level. I think a part of her thinks that she should be the one in charge.
Sorry, I'm reading about the dream real quick.
Yeah, the dreams are hard to talk about without getting into spoiler territory, which we can do.
Which we'll do at the end
if we yeah.
We'll do at the end.
Because there is one of those that made me go, what? I don't remember what that. So remind me when we get to the spoiler section at the end.
Is that the one involving Min?
No, that's the one involving Perrin jumping off the cliff.
Oh, well, I think I have an explanation for that one.
Yeah, when I reread that, I thought and I could not think of what the heck that is referring to. But it's got to be something down the road a ways.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much all of these are, except for the ones kind of about Rand. There are some of those are applicable, and she's having trouble she's still having trouble sorting through her feelings about Rand, and we kind of saw that at the end of the Great Hunt when she walks in on Min curled up in the bed with him, and she's still having trouble sorting through that. So she's having trouble reading those dreams because she doesn't know how much of this is just me worrying about him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and remember, again, we brought it up. She's like 17 years old, mm-hmm. or somewhere around that. We're all dumb when we're young and we think we're in love. Even though she's starting to kind of work away from it, in her mind, it's still there, because they were betrothed basically in their hometown for so long, ever since they were kids. Basically, it's almost an arranged marriage, you know.
Yeah, that's we didn't talk about that much in that scene in the Great Hunt when they go to the steading, and I think it's there that Loyal talks about the way Ogier marriages work, that your mother finds the girl for you, talks to that girl's mother, and then it's all arranged, and then that's that. And Matt's laughing about that's not the way it works for us. And Rand goes, I'm not so sure, and starts thinking about about the time they were becoming teenagers, and you know, suddenly Egwene's mom took much more interest in him and would have talks with Tam, and suddenly all of the girls that would dance with him at the festivals were only Egwene's good friends, and none of the other girls were allowed to dance with him. And he's like, maybe it just works the same but different.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're going to be Rand, it's a good thing. It's probably the prettiest girl in the village.
Yep.
But
Yep. So I like the beginning of chapter 38 because so we got chapter 37 from Egwene's point of view, and she's kind of grating at how Nynaeve is taking charge. But so you're kind of biased against Nynaeve here, but then at the opening of chapter 38, Egwene and Elaine freak out when Aviendha stands up and Nynaeve is just standing there with her arms crossed staring at her. She's pretty much perfectly calm. I just noticed something
what's that?
that, well, I'd mentioned that I think there's an underlying, not just that Nynaeve is Egwene resents Nynaeve taking charge, but she thinks she should be in charge. And right here in the third paragraph of chapter 38, she's also kind of resenting Elaine here. In the corner of her mind, she noted that Elaine was no longer surrounded by the glow. The daughter heir must still harbor foolish notions. She was never a Sanchin prisoner, is Egwene's thoughts.
Well, we still got that trauma.
We still have that. So I do think a part of it then may be that at this point, and this is actually going to come up later too, kind of socky back around for Egwene, that Nynaeve is the one who's kind of leading and insistent that even though we're not Aes Sedai, we act like it. That means we adhere to the three oaths as best as possible, even though we haven't taken them. And Egwene resents that because of what happened to her with the Sanchin, but also she has recognized that because of what happened to her with the Sanchin, she has skipped a couple grades, right? She was immediately raised to the accepted because she had become so strong in the power. Well, because of that.
We see this with traumatic childhoods too, because they say, oh, you grew up too soon. You were working full time at 14, and then you get into your 20s and somehow you lose direction because you didn't get those developmental stages that most kids get. And she, again, at 16 or 17 years old, she was made a slave and tortured.
Yeah. Physically tortured and psychologically conditioned. And so never, and luckily
not, and luckily not long enough that it stuck. But also when you do a behavior therapy for a short time, not long enough, you get a rebound effect.
Well, I think that's especially true with Egwene, because we saw when she's talking to Min in the kennels, as they call them, in the Dominic kennels, is she's smart enough to recognize what's happening, and she knew she was nearing her breaking point. They were about to break her. So it's not just the direct effects of what they were doing to her, but then the secondary effects of her recognizing what that was doing to her, how it was changing her, and the fact that she didn't think she could withstand it much longer.
Well, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but we see that effect in Captured Aes Sedai with the Sanchin later.
Yes.
Where they were past that breaking point. You would say, well, why didn't you?
She mentions one. I can't remember who it was, but she mentions an Aes Sedai who had been captured for a while, and she no longer answered to her Aes Sedai name because Egwene recognized her, and she only answered to her Domine, her pet name. So she was completely broken. Egwene had already seen it, and we will see it again because the Sanchin aren't going away. The main thing to jump out at me about chapter 38 is again the lack of communication that is But there's also a little bit of Dunning-Kruger effect here, that Elaine is kind of leading socially here because she thinks she is the most knowledgeable of the three of them about Aiel, but she's finding out how huge the gaps in her knowledge are. Not just the gaps, but how some of it is downright inaccurate. As they're talking to Bane and Chieta and Avienda as they're walking to where this injured Aiel is, and they're getting quite the education here. So besides being amusing, we've seen the Aiel a couple of times now, and now we're spending time with them. So we got a little bit more of who they were with Gaul and talking to Perrin, and now we actually get to see more of who they are, besides the fact that they're a warrior society that everyone is kind of afraid of.
Well, I've always liked Bane and Shade, and their interaction there with Egwene and Elaine. Your first sisters?
Yes, no.
Yeah, yes, no.
What? Huh?
And then Elaine gets lectury again,
and then once again she's told that's not quite how it is. Where was I? Yeah, okay, so it's the end of the chapter here when Nynaeve does the healing. So this is something that jumped out at me because of something we've been talking about a lot, which is it doesn't just happen. Right? That was one of the things that really ticked us off in the series, and they completely ignore the guidance and the training that all of these characters, all of the young characters have had. The three young men and the three young women in the books all have stages of growth, and they all have guidance and training, except for Nynaeve here. And we see that at the very end of this chapter. It's 440 on the paperback, when she starts to get angry, and she heals Dylan. And Egwene is trying to watch, and she can barely figure out what's going on here, because, and they've hinted at this, is Jordan's going to go into much more detail later when he gets more into the specifics of how weaving the threads works. But Nynaeve's way of healing is unique. For the time. This is not how healing is typically done, especially by women. She's weaving an incredibly complex flow of all of the powers, and Egwene can just barely follow what she's doing. Even though Egwene in raw power is very powerful, the technique and the skill that Nynaeve has in healing is pretty well unparalleled, especially at this point. But remember, she's a wilder. She's been doing this without knowing she's doing it for a while.
And realistically, it's not addressed in the book, but as a wisdom, people die, right? All the time. And sometimes you do a good job, sometimes you don't. And we don't know how many bodies are in the wake, right? Where she accidentally did it right, she accidentally did it wrong, and then over time she did it more right more often.
Well, we know it's been going on for a while, because when she has that conversation with Moiraine, where Moiraine tells her she has the spark, not just that she has a spark, but she's a wilder, she's a full-fledged channeler, even though she doesn't know it. And Nynaeve talks about her first time, and we got to think that was probably around when she was 15ish, because that's when women who have the spark show, because like puberty, it happens sooner for women. So 15ish, maybe 16 is when this first happened. She's in her mid-20s, so she's been doing this for a while, even not knowing what she's doing. And her in much the same way that Perrin is freaking huge without ever having touched, a barbell in his life, her her skill in the power has done that in the same way that Perrin's muscles have done what they did just by his work, just by his everyday life. So, and he's not even thinking about that. He's not thinking, I'm gonna move these heavy things around and swing this hammer so I can get big and buff. He's just doing what he do. And Nynaeve has done the same thing.
We had the comment with the deep dive, 3 boys from the same blah blah blah, right? Well, we also got one of the most massive guys ever. The strongest and most massive guys ever happens to be one of those boys. One of the most cunning men ever happens to be one of those boys, and one of the most imposing of his will upon others when it comes to personality.
Yeah,
is those 3 boys are those 3 massive traits that just happen to be the 3 boys that are ta'veren, which happen to be the 3 boys that explore the woods, which happen to be the 3 that matter when it comes to, well, now we got Nynaeve, who not only is immensely powerful in the power, but she's capable of complex weaving with all 5 at once. We've got Egwene, who is again parallel to Rand. She's got the personality of a leader from birth. And Elaine, who has the upbringing, the resources.
She's been trained in leadership and diplomacy.
Mm-hmm. And she's kind of the soft touch to a lot of things, realistically, because Egwene and Nynaeve tend to be kind of a hammer.
Yeah, and we see that. Well, we saw that in the hilarious scene where they're trying to talk Matt into carrying the letter for her, and she gets all imperious and commanding, or at least tries to. So she can do that. She has that side of her, but more often she is the soft touch. She's and she kind of mentions this. You get this more and more when we start to get more of Elaine's perspective, and she thinks about the things that her mother taught her. Of her, Morgase knew that one day Elaine's going to be queen, and so for as long as Elaine can remember, she's been learning these lessons. And Morgase's style is being confident enough that when you speak, you convince, you don't command, unless it's absolutely necessary. But I just wanted to point that out about Nynaeve, is that this isn't something that just happened. This is something that developed for perhaps a decade of her raw talent with a capital T, manifesting itself as she worked and worked and worked. And that's something I'd never thought of before. To your point, is we don't know how many times it didn't work. And we do know that healing can kill you because it's so taxing on the body. So it's entirely plausible, in fact, probable, that there were times Nynaeve accidentally killed somebody when she was trying to heal them.
Well, that's what I said. We don't know the process, because you naturally get better at things with enough repetition, without even thinking about it. You just gravitate to the thing that worked a little bit better every time. And we don't know the bodies that are in the wake.
And the power, the one power is kind of there is kind of a physical aspect to it, in the way it works. I mean, it does make you physically tired. It makes you mentally tired. I think that's kind of, I think that, I've never really thought about this before, but I think maybe the one power, its usage, is kind of Jordan's idea of the soul, the mind and body together, because it does tax both of those.
He was a physicist, and we do know we all have a shared kind of, I'm going to try to use the right word here, a shared kind of vibration in the universe together. And so I think he was kind of going down. Now soul is what some people call that, I think. And so he was kind of going down that road. It's an explanation for that universal oneness that we all have. And it's a transfer of that from one person to
Well,
the
he
other.
was also, I mean, he's not a uh 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 why did I just brain fart? Why in the Witch in the Wardrobe? What?
Oh, our commenters are gonna shoot
Yeah.
us.
Please admonish us and make fun of us for brain farting on this, but him and Tolkien were very blatant in their allegories of Christianity in their works, and we don't get that with Jordan. But from what I've read, he was a pretty devout Christian, and but as you say, he's also a physicist. He's also got his degree in physics, and a part of me thinks that maybe this is kind of his attempt to kind of square the circle of of physics and metaphysics of this is kind of, because there is a lot about souls in this series, and so I think in some ways this may be kind of his attempt to explain what that means in more or less tangible language and ideas, because the idea of a soul is something that has been contemplated and debated forever.
Okay, we're gonna get skewered for this, but I did look it up. C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis.
Oh,
We're dorks.
that's the definition of brain fart right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we both had a see this is this universal vibration. We had the same brain fart at the same time. And I think it was your struggle in your mind that made me overthink everything. I was like, Narnia, lions, just
I can start naming. I can start naming characters, and I
Yeah.
can't name the author. Yeah.
No. But we've with our sexy time with Sam talks, I've talked about similar things to that. So, but yeah, there is this universal kind of vibration that we have, and I think he's kind of describing that with a proxy in the power. And it does take energy from you because you're putting part of yourself in that other person to heal their body, and you're taking parts of their body to heal their body. So everybody gets worn out from the process, which is kind of cool. I liked that he put a kind of a what is it called when you can't get a vehicle over a certain speed?
A limiter.
A limiter. Yeah, he put a limiter on there where these people can't be all powerful because it does require this physical aspect to it. Now it somewhat strays from that at times in the storytelling a little bit, where you're like, oh, they did a lot right there, where they, and then later it's not like they developed to where they could get a lot, they couldn't do as much. I'm like, he kind of waffles on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Anderson did all through the last 3 books.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did have rules, but they weren't like mathematically precise rules.
Yeah,
They were
Jordan
more
did a better job
guidelines.
of it. I think Sanderson went the MCU route where everything just became godlike. Now we're talking the spoiler talks, but
do you have any thoughts on them getting captured here at chapter 39? Other than, yeah, you should have seen this coming. I mean, this is what the ship captain was warning them about is, Cairhien is just pure chaos right now. I mean, it's a multi-factional civil war. And then on top of that, because there has been a complete breakdown of law and order, then you have multi-factional brigand and bandit groups running around, adding to the chaos and the danger. And then of course they get thumped in the head before they can do anything with the power, because they don't see it coming.
I think it's just another example of what you talked about, the weakness that it still exists. Some badass Aiel stuff comes out of it. We meet Rourke, which is awesome.
And this, I'm kind of fast forwarding to this because this ties into Nynaeve's power, because we see her do something here that shocks Egwene and Nynaeve or Egwene and Elaine, and even surprises Nynaeve because of what she does. Of I didn't even know that was possible, and she's not quite sure what she did. But it's not, again, it's not just it'll come when you need it. No, she already has this baseline of back to the parent example, right? He has this baseline of strength just from doing what he does in his daily life. And then if you put him on a barbell and said, okay, now this is how you deadlift, do it, he could immediately put people who have been working at that, dedicated to that, to shame, just because of his raw power. And the more you work with him, then the more he's going to surpass that. And that's what you're seeing with Nynaeve here, is she already has this baseline of strength and skill, and now she's finally kind of learning what that is and how to manipulate it consciously.
Well, not only that, is we're introduced to the other concept of balefire.
Mm-hmm.
And balefire seems to be the culmination of everything power, right?
Yeah.
And her answer was, I was so angry, I don't know what I did. She just put it all together and shot it out like a what it was, a bar of light. And we also see the connection of that with the pattern. So this everything all at once, which is pure light, is connected to the pattern, which unravels it.
Yeah, I think. Well, we haven't learned that yet, I don't think.
Didn't some of the wounds on the Aiel go away when she killed the Madral?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that happens here. Moraine is going to explain what balefire is. Actually, no, she doesn't. She
sort of does in the
she mentions it, because she mentions that she has a way to kill a Forsaken with this powerful weave, but it's not until the Fires of Heaven that she actually explains what it does to the pattern. Oh yeah, even before that though, even before that, we see a growth point for Nynaeve. I'd kind of forgotten about this, but this is important. Page 451 in the paperback, when she heals Elaine, she gets mad, and well, first she gets panicked because they took my herbs. Because remember, because of her block, because of the way she'd originally started doing this unconsciously, she had to have her herbs, even though she knew that what she was doing was healing with the power. But she still needed that training wheel.
Yeah, that crutch.
Well, now she becomes so angry and so desperate that she breaks that part of her block. She still has to be angry to channel, but she no longer needs the herbs to heal. So she even before she does what she does with the weaves to attack, she has a growth point here.
Well, we also see a little bit of Egwene too, because of her ability with metals.
Oh yeah.
So that's something that is ever important, but they established that when she was with the
Seanchan.
With the Seanchan, yeah.
Oh, even before they jump in, another interesting point is the Madral know what Lan's ring is. They recognize Lan's ring, which I thought was interesting and cool. That 3 Aes Sedai and 1 carried this. So I'm curious if the dark side has noticed the girls yet or not, or if this is just about Lan, because they know his ring.
Yeah, he's in their dark prophecies.
Yeah. Or if they recognize that, because I don't know. Well,
Well, it says these are the three we're looking for, so they know
no,
there's
that's right.
three.
That's right. That's right. Because Leandrin purposely took Egwene and Nynaeve. So Egwene and Nynaeve for sure have already been marked out by the dark, because that's why Leandrin took them out of the tower, because of their connection to Rand. So yeah, they do know that Nynaeve has a connection to Lan, and this ring marks one of those as Nynaeve. I love the way Jordan does this fight scene. It's pretty quick, and it's it's kind of poetic language almost, about the outer door swung open, black veiled death flowing in from the night. And the Aiel just take out all the bandits with hardly a problem. And then we get more of their culture and personality with the way they tap their shields and start taunting the Madral to dance with them. Who is it that? Yeah, Egwene does something different too here. So it's they're powerful, and all three of them are powerful enough and skilled enough that once they have an understanding of, it's like a basic architecture student. Okay, well now you have a basic understanding of how structures work, so now you can start building your own house. And the more raw talent you have with this, the more you're going to be able to do with it, versus someone else who's going to require more and more classes, more and more direction to be able to build more and more complex structures. So that's what we see here with Egwene when she doesn't throw fire at them, which is the usual way. Fire just literally bursts out of them.
Mm-hmm. And then that's where Nynaeve uses the balefire.
Mm-hmm. I love the introduction of stupid. All right, I meant to look this up earlier. How do you pronounce his name?
Rourke. I think that's how they do it in the Ruark. I don't.
That's not helpful at all.
Yeah, they didn't. It wasn't helpful at all how they did that. RHO or so
Rourke?
our so Rourke.
I don't know. I've always said Ruark.
Yeah, that's what I always did. But he OUR would be our.
Yeah.
Rourke. I don't know. I come from a
That's
family. My mom can't say the word roar. My uncle couldn't either, and he had a long ponytail. And we'd say, "What does the lion say, Tommy?" And he'd go,
I'm sorry, Elaine said in a clear voice that we interrupted your dance. Perhaps we should not have interfered. The graying man, Rourke, gave a deep chuckle. I said, I for one am glad of whatever it was you did. For a moment, he looked not entirely sure of that, but in the next, he had his good temper back. We could have killed them, but 3 shadow men, they would have killed 2 or 3 of us, certainly, perhaps all, and I cannot say we would have finished them all. For the young, death is an enemy they wish to try their strength against. For those of us a little older, she is an old friend, an old lover, but one we are not eager to meet again soon. So right off the bat, Jordan makes him likable, and you get an idea of who he is. And then you get more of what the Aiel are doing here. And then much like so I didn't mention it before because I wanted to, let it progress a little bit more, but Perrin mentions the Gaul where he should look if he's looking for he who comes with the dawn. So Gaul is already headed that way and is certainly going to round up any Aiel he runs into on his way there. And now we have again the Aiel being directed to what we know is going to be the climax of this book, because that's how it started. Is Rand is literally running to the Heart of the Stone and Kalendor, and everybody else is following him, converging there. And now we've added another element to that with the Aiel. I like that Ruark is what I'm going to keep saying because it's easier to pronounce. I like that he recognizes the ring too. One of them carries a ring I have heard of as a boy. So just adding to the legend that is Lan. So they continue their journey with that, and then chapter 40 we get back to Matt. Do we want to keep going there?
No, I think that's a good stopping point because we're about an hour into this one.
Yeah, the next bit is just a chapter on Matt, but then it's going to be a long section of Perrin and then back to Matt. So we'll talk about Perrin and Matt next time.
Yeah, and let's try to conclude this in 2 more episodes, I think.
Yeah, I think we can. We've got a big section on Perrin and Matt, and then we actually get to Tyr, and so all of the stuff that happens in Tyr, I think we could wrap up. So yeah, I think we can push it and be done with the Dragon Reborn in 2 more episodes of this.
Okay, so at this point, if you don't want the spoilers, go ahead and bow out now, and we'll see you on the next one. Again, leave comments because we're going to address those at the beginning of each one now. And
yeah, especially if this is your first read through. So we're doing this as a reread and our insights for that. But if there are
reread, yeah.
But if you're one of those who watched our talks about the Craptacular series and said you were gonna read it, would read the series afterward, read the books afterwards. If you've been following along, then if you have first timer questions, throw those out there and we'll do our best to spoiler free answer those.
But if you're a rereader, now this is the part of the episode where we'll have our spoilers if we do. And okay, so let's take a quick pee break and then I have a specific question. If we're going to start with spoilers, we might as well start with dreams, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is, once again, spoilers, run away if you don't want them, because that's all this last section is going to be. And of course, the biggest ones are always the dreams. I mean, because some of those go all the way to the very end, like Min's dream of Rand on a boat seeming dead, or Min's vision. I don't even remember when that was. I think that was in the Great Hunt where she first had that vision, and she has it a couple of times of Rand on a boat seemingly dead, surrounded by 3 women. That's the end of the book, the end of the series. I mean, so some of these are way in advance.
Well, Perrin with his Falcon and his Hawk, we've met the Falcon, and it's the beginning of the next book where we meet the Hawk. And then you don't even know, I guess you kind of know that that's the case, but then how impactful it actually is till, oh shoot, when are they in Geldon?
That is the beginning of Crown of Swords.
Okay, so I mean that's
Book
7.
7. Yeah.
Book 7, yeah. So you get some of that. Now, the one you said that got you was Perrin stepping off the cliff.
Yeah.
And
What in
this
the
this is
world?
actually second to last book or the last book. To me, that was his crash course in the world of dreams in order to fight somebody who has been living in it for decades.
Hmm.
Because remember, because think of his teacher, think of the symbolism with the having to fly, but he's got to learn it before he hits the bottom. So to me, that was his crash course in managing the world of dreams because he had to basically fight somebody in it.
Okay. That makes the most sense. I don't know if anyone else has any other ideas, but yeah, the I don't know why, but the learning to fly is what I got. Well, actually, it was both of it. It was okay. What's the towering cliff, and what does flying have to do with it?
Well, flying is
Um,
manipulating the physics of the world
but
of dreams.
it it ties in pretty nicely with your thought there because of Hopper is his
Mhm.
guide in the world of dreams, and you know he got all his allergies started bothering him when he saw Hopper jump up and fly away, which was his really his first kind of introduction, his first kind of tease of what is possible in the world of dreams.
Now, the one I can't think of is Min springing the trap. I can't remember what trap she sprung.
And somehow walking through it without so much as seeing it. I am pretty sure that is when she gets back into the tower, she's recognized, and it's one of the triggers to the schism of the tower. Because she's recognized by Elida as having a connection to Moraine, and now she's having private talks with Sawan. What's going on here? Sawan's up to something, and then that's when Alviarin comes to her and they start scheming.
Which, though, I don't see the not seeing it because she saw everything that happened there and was integral in the escape.
I I
There's
think
got to be another trap involved.
I see. I thought that was she doesn't know what's going to happen. She sees that there's going to be fighting, but she doesn't know what that means. And then just the walking through it part, I thought was her getting out of the tower. I can't think of anything else that could be with Min, uh, as far as traps go.
She's integral in breaking the seals.
The only other thing I can think of is way in advance. It's when Rand goes to arrange his truce with the Sanshin, and it's Simirhaj in disguise. I think Min is there.
Yes, she was.
That's the only time the only other time I can think of where Min is involved in walking into a trap.
Yeah, but it's just that the not so much as seeing it, that she springs a trap, that something happens where she doesn't even notice, but she's the one that spurred it. And that's the part of
And that's why I think it has to do with the tower, because we'll see when we get there that she is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. She's kind of the trigger to bringing this simmering dissatisfaction with Sawan and bringing it together to actually create to become a conspiracy to overthrow her.
unless the trap is actually Alvier and not Elida.
Oh
Elida's
yeah,
easy to see.
yeah.
Again, overthinking things, that's what we do as Wheels
Oh
Time
yeah.
fans. Especially since the source is no longer able to answer questions.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, supposedly, I just brain farted on his wife's name. But I thought she and one of Jordan's assistants slash researchers, he had one or two of them, whose whose only job was to help keep his notes together and keep track of what had been published to make sure that, one, there weren't any contradictions, and two, things that he wanted to make sure were resolved were resolved. I thought they were putting together an encyclopedia that was basically a collating of his notes. But I don't know if there's been any update on that or if that's actually happening, because I have not seen anything about it in years. But I thought that was something that was going to happen. And I really hope it does, because as you say, the source can no longer answer questions, and there are plenty of unanswered questions or uncertain questions. I mean, we've answered these questions we have, but we're not sure.
Well, that last book to me was like the last season of Game of Thrones. It was just bring everything in and let's try to tie up as much as we can. In fact, I think it was supposed to be 2 more books, but something caused them to put it all in that book. I think it was supposed to be 15 total, but it ended up 14. Let's see. We got something chasing Matt. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about? Oh, now that we know Avienda, this is one of my biggest beefs with the direction Jordan went with that tryst. For those that know what we're talking about, Elaine, Avienda, and Min, is at first, like we talked about with Elaine, is the smoother. At first, they all were very separate in their personalities and in their, but they almost kind of became one woman by the end.
When they become first, when they become first sisters.
Yeah, and it kind of started taking away from it, because like they were all fierce. They were all this, where Elaine should have become the motherly diplomatic one, which he kind of strayed away from that a little bit. Avienda should have been the fierce one, and she softened up a lot. And Min was the philosophical one. She was the beyond average thought person, the thinking outside the box one, I should say.
Because she comes from a very different place than the others do.
Yeah, and she's definitely more right-brained than the others. They're very structured. The others are very structured, and she seemed to be a little bit more flighty, which how can you not be when you have visions, right?
Right.
And then she all of a sudden became as fierce as Avienda, and so did Elaine, and they all became Captain Marvel by the end.
Well,
ish, to a certain
I don't
degree.
think Min ever really does. She does become more capable with her knives and whatnot, but she's never a warrior, I don't think. And she's always pretty courageous in her own way. Elaine, for me especially, I think you're right on that. She's much more likable in these early books. Like I talked about with this section here, she's doing her best to put those lessons from her mother into practice already here. And that makes her very likable. You get to see her growth as she progresses, but the way she behaves when she's actually trying to secure the throne, that whole storyline, once she gets to Camelin, makes that whole storyline much more enjoyable than I think it would have been otherwise. I can see what's happening, that Elaine and Avienda are supposed to be complementing each other in the way we've talked about, of you need that complementarian relationship that I mean, they kind of talk about it in the ceremony where they become first sisters, of this is what's best about you, this is what's worst about you, and they kind of work on each other to soften those edges, and that's what does bring them closer together, both in personality as well as in relationship. But the way it's written, Elaine behaves in a a very annoying fashion, because as I said, the reason the books work so well, and not just this TV series, but so much of modern movie and TV doesn't work, is because even when you look at their decisions and say, why are you doing that? That's dumb. For the character, it's rational.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts to behave in ways that are annoying because they strike me as irrational
Yes.
and thus out of character from what we have
Which,
seen for up to that point.
uh, which I guess because he made her pregnant at the time, you can say it's a hormonal thing, but which she does address in her own mind in some of those instances. But at the same time, yeah, it was almost forced at that point, and it seemed like we got into that trend of super strong woman by the end. And yeah, you're right. It wasn't as much with men, but it still did trend in that direction. And it was almost like they all became almost similar instead of complementary. It was supposed to be a tripod. Everything again, all these things in threes, right? So it was supposed to be a tripod of support for the person who had to save the world.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I think that kind of went away a little bit.
Well, I'm nearing there in my reread because I'm way past the Dragon Reborn at this point. So that I think it's a good thing we're doing this specific spoiler section at the end now, because that's certainly something we should keep an eye on as we get to that, and that's something to think about as we get to that point. So hopefully we can in our meanderings here at the end of these discussions can come across more of those things of, this is stuff that's going to be a through line for a bunch of books, so let's keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and with the female characters especially, Jordan was always credited with writing females well, and part of that was because of his wife's influence. But he did so much better with Egwene and Nynaeve.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Than he did with the other three that really matter. And I mean, he started out great with them, but it just kind of tapered off at the end. And Nynaeve, especially because Elaine's the one that again, super spoilers, Elaine's the one that's going to be the mother, but Nynaeve is the one who becomes the motherly person, and she had to learn that softening.
Yes.
To get down that route, and that happens not only with Lan, as we've talked about, not only with situations like we just read, where she has to heal somebody or nurture somebody along those lines, but she also, even her time with the menagerie with Val and Luca, she softens up in that time. And so it's all of these events that again, I think Nynaeve is the most impactful female character of them all, even though you kind of hate her at first. And Egwene is the other way around. She was the soft little girl that had to grow up. And we see all of that. But with Elaine, Min's my favorite of those three. But with Elaine, Min, and Avienda, you see a little bit, but there's no development other than they just kind of become similar.
Yeah, I would superficially agree with that, but I'm going to keep an eye on it in the reread when I get to those parts where that is more explicitly happening in the much later books.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get back to Min's philosophy stuff, because of just, if those who pay attention to our other talks other than just Wheel of Time, this is going to be something different for me this time I read it around, because I have delved so deep into modern philosophy, and how the brain works. So anything else we want to add? Any other maybe spoiler stuff that came up in there?
No, I don't think there was anything that kind of jumped out at me of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. However you want to pronounce it, the cool dude, he obviously becomes the father figure for almost everybody in the next couple books, which is cool. And I like the way they described him, how he just, the way he smiled and talked made Nynaeve even calm down. And I think that's kind of the important part of his character. Not only is he badass, but he's basically the dad everybody wanted, you know.
That's that is a good point, and something to try and make sure we point out way down the road when we get there. But when Rand starts to become a massive asshole is after he's separated from Ruark. Is when he has him and the other Aiel chiefs, but especially him, he really helps temper him. He really helps temper Rand, not just his temper, but then also his decision making, his humility, his guilt, all of these things that spiral out of control. And when it really spirals out of control, I'd never really thought about that before, but it's when he runs off on his own and he's not around Ruark anymore, especially.
No, he actually kind of shuts him out to some degree, because he is still having meetings and stuff without him. But also we see Perrin's future Hawk is also tempered by
Ruark.
yeah. So he's kind of, again, the father everybody wants.
And we'll get to start
enough steel, but just enough father, just enough almost, I guess it's an empathetic kind of feel. He's like, I feel what you're talking about, but this is the way we need to do
it. He's the kind of father that will make you cut your own switch and tell you that this is going to hurt me more than you, and actually mean it. And you can believe it.
Well, again, it reminds me of the time I spent with you and your father, when he was like, is this malice or is this ignorance? Because if it's ignorance, we're going to do it this way, and it better not happen again. And that was very clear that it better not happen again. Now, if it's malice, we're going to do it this way, because now you knew what you were doing. And that's kind of the fatherliness he kind of comes across to me as, is like, you're doing this because you're a stupid little girl. When he's talking to Barrelane, you're doing this because you're a spoiled little girl that's always been a princess. Don't do it again. And here's your little switching. And
well, that's a good place to end this episode, because, and hopefully we can get through this in just 2 more, because we're going to get a lot of that right off the bat with book 4.
That's true.
Which is great, which we can point out, we can go into in more depth right off the bat with book 4.
Okay, so Matt and Perrin next time, and then we finish with the
climax is here. Yeah,
the climax in the dome. Giggity. where Matt blows a big hole.
I can't wait. There's some. I'm gonna have to like refine my notes here, because there's some really great stuff that happens here in this last chunk of the book.
We meet some cool characters like Jylen, and we get to see a lot more of the Aiel, which is sets us up for book 4, but it's also pretty cool. I really think they could have been a deeper group in their culture, but I understand that we had to get into the waste and then back out.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming up. For those that are reread it with a new mind. Whatever you've gone through in the last however long it's been since you read it, add those things to how you read this, and keep those comments coming, because I thought that was fun in the beginning, addressing them too. So anything else?
Nope. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, time to get some sunshine today.